Thank you. So thank you for having me. I was actually a great one to follow up. My husband just signed up for the Tough Mudder, and he's already very nervous about how that's going to go. So I can tell him it's everything that he's fearing it's going to be. I wanted to start today talking about love stories. So a great love story is one that is complex and even messy sometimes. And it's partly because as we think about relationships, the things that we want are sometimes hard to articulate. We're not always clear on exactly what we're looking for. And for this reason, I've always kind of hated romantic comedies. I know some people love them. Me personally, they've always felt too simple, not really believable, and kind of suspicious that things always work out that way. The kind of love stories that I loved as a kid was more about superheroes. And my favorite was Wonder Woman, and I don't know how many folks are into the details of love stories of our superheroes, but Wonder Woman was an Amazonian princess. She was in love with this Air Force pilot who only noticed her when she was in her hero outfit, but didn't really give her the time of day when she was in her regular disguise. And you think about the themes with our superheroes in love, there's often this kind of running current of being accepted for who we are. And really kind of who we are underneath. And there's also these great tensions between the responsibility to the greater good and the responsibility to the people who really know us best. It's way more interesting. I also happen to love science fiction films, and I imagine I'm in good company here based on the other presentations. And you know, those stories are all about exploration and imagination and adventure, but it actually is really hard to find a good love story inside of a science fiction, because it's usually about solving a murder mystery or killing aliens, you know, some big artificial intelligence dominating us and fighting that, or floating off into space, cold and alone. You know, really not the best environment for a romantic relationship. So great love stories inspire us. They remind us of what's important and the things that are worth sacrificing for. They move us forward and closer together, and the characters always evolve in the story. Now, I never really thought of designing technology as an act of love. As my introduction, kind of awkward hearing that echoed back, says my very first job in tech was working at a household cleaning company. And so I spent my time trying to figure out how to make anti-fogging window cleaners or better ways to kill insects. And I wouldn't necessarily call it an act of love, right? Squash them. And over the course of 20 years, I've worked in a really wide range of products. I've worked for some very big companies. And I love my work, but I would never consider any of those jobs an act of love until I saw the movie Her. And for those of you who are not familiar with the story, and I do encourage you to see it, Her is a film by Spike Jonze, who also did Being John Malkovich and several other Where the Wild Things Are. And it was nominated for Best Picture. It won an Academy Award for Original Screenplay. And it's a movie that's set in the not-too-distant future, where a man falls deeply in love with his operating system. And one of the things that makes this operating system so advanced is that it has intuition. And so when you think about what we know about science fiction and stories about the future, it seems a little bit like, oh gosh, she probably starts stalking him or some weird thing happens. But what I love, my favorite quote from Spike Jonze in this film, was that the movie is actually not about technology, even though technology is a huge part of the characters. Not about technology, because it is a love story. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. So I'm incredibly fortunate to have a job where I get to spend a lot of time solving some really big, ambiguous, and nebulous problems. As a designer, you wouldn't always necessarily think that, you know, a designer is a person who could help navigate these complex spaces. But the role of design thinking and the way that we look at problems from a design lens, that's more what I mean when I say design. It's not specifically the role of the person making an object. And so design as an approach to thinking about complex problems, a lot of what my job entails is listening to people. Almost always it just starts with that. And understanding the complexity of a problem or situation and looking for ways that there are connections, but ultimately where is that clarity or focus or simplicity that we can get to that helps unlock the problem or reframe the entire question. And I see that in a lot of the presentations that we talked about today, which is about reframing the way we look at the problem. So the really exciting, really kind of moving part of that is being able to talk about what insight is in different ways in different parts of the company. When you think about insight, it's actually something fundamentally human, right? Like from a traditional, very pure definition, there's words like intuitive and instinctive, understanding and awareness, and these are things that we have as human beings. And of course, being dedicated and devoted to a topic helps us develop better insights and stronger perspectives and a better intuition. But ultimately, insight is something that is fundamentally human. It either resonates or it doesn't. And so you think about a company like where I work, where there's very complicated products and thousands of people working on them at any one time, and all those human beings could have insight at any given moment. It starts to feel a little bit messy. And so this is a picture of what we call internally our operating system group. We are the collection of engineers, researchers, marketers, designers that work on all the operating systems at Microsoft. So you think of Windows and Xbox and phones and a lot of our online services. There's a good, awesome, and very large collection of people working on those products at any one time. And this is us showing our Super Bowl spirit, which was quite a feat to get everybody onto the field at once and into this formation. But the reason I bring this up is because there's insight that lives inside of each of these people, right? With their own expertise and their own way of looking at problems. And so it gets me thinking about what is the nature of insight and innovation and the relationship between the two. And when you take a closer look and you think about all those people interacting with each other, one thing that I fundamentally believe is that the relationship between insights and innovation comes down to conversations between people. In fact, I would say that innovation lives and dies by the conversations that happen between people. And what do I mean by that? So when we think about insight in the way that I'm speaking about in this presentation, insight is something that starts in the heart or in the mind. And if I have an insight, something that is, I think, going to be world-changing and revolutionary, there's two ways that I can actually make that real in the world. The first one is to communicate it, right? To talk to another human being about it. And the second way is to go into my garage and make it myself, right? I'm going to pour everything in as an individual and make this insight, this innovation real. The trick is if something is complex and takes more than just one person to get done, or any skill that I don't have, which there's a lot of them, there's only so far I can go, and I'm back to number one, which is I need to communicate with other people. But if we think about communication, it breaks down pretty easily, or at least it's known to break down occasionally. So at the heart of each of those conversations, there's this potential for not just the conversation to break down, but the innovation can break down with it, because the conversations are pretty fragile sometimes. So the time that the trailer for Her came out, we were working on a product that we just released inside of Windows Phone called Cortana. And Cortana is our personal assistant, digital assistant. She is devoted specifically to you. She understands your personal preferences and likes, but also the behaviors that are unique to you. And she seeks to find ways to help you focus on the things that matter most to you. So we've been working incredibly hard on this product. We focus in on the details of what personal means and really innovating in that space. And then the trailer for Her comes out. It's like, it's exactly what we were talking about. We're talking about something that's so personal that it could really be intimately yours. Boy, what does that do to our product? What does that do to our innovation? Conversations started to break down a bit. Does that mean that it's irrelevant? Or does that mean it's even more relevant than ever now that it's in a Hollywood movie? How do we think about this? And so I'm known for not really having good boundaries, so I and a couple other people from our design studio said, hey, let's just call Warner Brothers and the filmmakers and ask them if they'd be interested in some sort of creative partnership. And they were curious and initially a little bit leery, as you could imagine. But they ended up being really fantastic creative partners because they were willing to try something new and different with us. And so they invited us down to LA to see the film before we had any idea what it is exactly what we were going to do. And we were there with movie critics and journalists, and it was really pretty humbling. It was people who help to set culture and tell stories about the films that they really think are going to have an impact on culture. And so when I came out of the film, I was viscerally moved and touched by what I had seen. And I couldn't exactly point to why, other than, gosh, I think about these products all the time. It's kind of, what we focus on, but something struck a chord in another level. And I spent an enormous amount of time talking about the film, obsessing it, pretending to be like an amateur critic, thinking through the different themes. And the more I talked to people, it became clear to me that the chord that the movie had struck was that I, as a product designer, do not just design products. I build relationships through the products that we create. And the reason that insight shifted, shifted my thinking, is you start to think about all the moments and these experiences that we design. They ladder up to a larger relationship. You think of every little nuance in your product, every little interaction, they ladder up to a larger relationship. And so that shift in thinking kind of set a new lens on what it is we do as designers, or what it is that we do as product makers and storytellers. That, we talk about brands as building relationships, right? But when we think about the nature of how people form relationships, human beings, we naturally do that. You put Tom Hanks on an island for 10 years and no other human being, and he'll become a friend with his volleyball, right? We naturally form friendships, relationships with the objects and the people in our lives. That putting a new lens on thinking about all those moments of interaction that we design and what they ladder up to started to shift the way that I thought about every choice that I make as a designer. If you also think about the relationship that we have with our technology, one exercise that we've done that I think is fascinating, and we've done this quite a few times now, is asking people to name somebody that they love in their life. Think of somebody who is close and personal and important to you. And then also think about an object that you love, a thing that you love that's close to you. And I think what's blown me away is the number of people that talk about their phone as the object they love, almost as equally as the person that they love. And when they say they love their phone, it isn't necessarily that the object itself is great and they couldn't live without it, but it's the connections that it creates, the relationships on the other side, the people that it connects. Their entire lives are inside these objects. And when you think about it, our phones are the only objects that are really blood temperature in our lives, the technology that's so close to us that it is constantly in a pocket, constantly on our bodies. So when you think about every little piece of interaction that we design with the products that people are interacting with, how those ladder up to the relationships, it starts to make you wonder, what kind of relationships do we care about? What kind of relationships are important to us? And are we being as intentional as we can be about what kind of relationships we're creating in the world? Another dimension of the relationships is when you think about it, before anything goes out the door, there's, and from a product development standpoint, the number of engineers, researchers, marketers, and designers that have to have relationships with each other in order to bring a product to market. And I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't say we always necessarily have the best, healthiest relationships between divisions if we think about especially large groups. And so the importance of conversation and relationship inside of our companies and how that affects the products that we bring to market. So again, thinking about several layers. So when we went back to the filmmakers with our pitch, I had nothing traditional to offer. Again, I'm a product designer. I had no healthy marketing budget, or I had no way to help boost the promotion of the film. But what I did have was a way to create relationships with a community of people that we both cared about. And that's thought leaders and students who are making the next generation of technology. And so what we did is we hosted 2 workshops, one in LA at the Art Center College of Design, and one in New York with NYU, Tisch, ITP, and Parsons. And we put the film at the center of the project, and we asked one question: how can human emotions inspire new interactions with technology and each other? And so we did this exercise to kind of start off the process, and I thought this was fascinating and fun enough to share with you guys. We asked students to think about, before they ever saw the film, what's something you would trust a computer to do? And then what's something that you would only trust a human being to do? And we talk about computers, we say, yes, I would trust my computer to control my money. Not even just like manage or advise, but to just full on control it in the future. But I would only trust a human being to have good taste. So I'll let the computer, decide my financial future, but I would not let my computer pick out what outfit I wear in the morning, because I don't trust that. In the future, I'd trust my computer to discover and outreach and head into new frontiers. But I would only trust a human to love. And this is one of my favorites. I, in the future, will trust a computer to give me surgery. I trust my eyes, I trust my brain, I trust my heart with a computer. But I would only trust a human being to care for me after I am recovering from that surgery. And what I thought was really interesting is you start to tease apart the nature of what are those uniquely human attributes, what are those things that we want to attribute just to our human relationships. But as we started to go through the workshop, the students saw the film, they started to play with different concepts. We see this kind of running theme of also that we want our interactions with technology to have more human qualities to it. We want the flaws that are in humans because it gives us a chance to think and to connect. That we don't have to think about all that messiness as something to minimize and simplify. All that complexity of human beings is actually something that we can embrace and bring into the product in interesting ways. And so over the course of the 2 days, students explored concepts from, how would I design a technology to help protect my feelings from being hurt by another person? Or another one of my favorite ones was for those of us who used to make mixed tapes for each other back in the day. Yeah, what's replaced the mixtape? How come there's no great way to say I love you with 8 tracks of music in the modern world? So I think it was really fascinating because the film brought this dimension of emotional consideration to the process. And one of the best comments that we got from students was that they'd never before in the design process considered human relationships as an ingredient to a product. Hadn't considered their own personal relationships as a lens that they could use to think about how to create better designs. So one of my favorite outcomes of the project, because as I would say, it's not your traditional marketing, it was definitely, we called it a design experiment, because we actually didn't know on the other side what we were going to get. And we're actually quite pleased with a couple of things. One is the relationships that we've built, the conversations we've had, the shift in thinking, that we don't have to lead with our brand necessarily to have interesting conversations. We can lead with the thought leadership. We can lead with the students' conversations. And the part that I'm also particularly proud of is the shift that happened internally, some of the outcomes that we had with our engineering and marketing teams. So this is a picture of Cortana. So you know what you're looking at behind me. Cortana on our phones, just announced a few weeks ago. One of the things that Warner Brothers did is let us preview the film at Microsoft long before it came out. So we brought everybody that was working on this product, and it's a good 300, 400 people, engineers and marketers and researchers and designers. And you could hear in the theater as the movie was playing, people laughing when they recognized themselves in the characters or when they recognized their work in the storyline. And afterwards, we had a lot of conversations, partly to kind of say, what did we get from that experience? And the biggest takeaway was thinking differently about what we design. That when we talk about connected devices or we talk about ecosystems, starting to think about in the lens of relationships and how those relationships work, the devices work as a relationship, or the relationships that they have with human beings. And also the ways that we go about designing our products, we had some new thinking there as well. So just a quick example. When we designed Cortana, because we were making such an emphasis on her being personal, that being the difference in the innovation, one of the things that we did is we went out and we talked to real personal assistants. And I don't know how many people in this room, shown by hands, if you have a personal assistant, we might actually have a couple people in this room, personal assistant. So talking to some of the people who assist for a living, who work for some of the highest powered, especially in finance, we talk about finance guys, people in entertainment, people with highly complex and busy lives. Most of us don't have a personal assistant, but understanding that context of what it takes to be there for your client. And one particular insight that we had was that a lot of these assistants carry around a notebook. And in this notebook, they're writing down everything that you like and everything that you don't like and everything you say you like but you really don't, and all the unarticulated needs and all those nuances inside of there that aren't necessarily implicit or explicit, excuse me. And so one thing that we did with the product is to design a notebook inside of Cortana where you as a customer can go and see what she's learning about you, but also more importantly, adjust and help correct and guide her along the way. But also that notebook is private. That notebook is just for you. And so if Cortana had picked up that I was following the Seahawks for a week, she may have thought that, hey, yeah, it seems like you're really into football. Here, let me tell you this and that. I don't care anything about football. I was just doing what everybody else around me was doing because it seemed like a lot of fun. So I could go in there and let her know, stop telling me about football because I really have no interest in getting smarter about that. But being able to think about the principles that we design, that we use to design our product as something that's inspired by real human relationships, and thinking about how that can create a new lens on what we innovate on, as opposed to just providing more recommendations or more restaurants that you might want to go eat at. So when I think about all the people that came together, I think that the nature of human beings having natural insights is actually something we consider an asset, something we can consider as a resource. And the trick is finding the stories that activate those insights in a common and shared and working towards a common vision. So everybody has a chart, so I made a chart. If I was to sum it all up and I was to say, what did we take from this experience? What are we learning? Because I certainly don't purport to have it all figured out. But what we are learning is that there is a relationship. There is the importance of the role of conversations and relationships as we push forward in our insights and innovations. That there is an emotional connection between these things, and we need better ways to understand how to create that meaning, how to understand how to bring that to our products, but it's not always a science. And especially on the top there, I'm a big believer in that cycle of what we bring from the outside in, but also what it is that we're bringing from the inside out, our stories, our insights, and sharing and leading conversations with communities that matter to us. And if we can get a good cycle spinning up here, I do believe at the end of the day what we're producing is a depth of understanding of what's meaningful and what's relevant in a way that is uniquely human, maybe even a little bit more right brain than left brain. So when you put people at the heart of the experience and you think about the messiness of our emotions and what makes us human, and you embrace that into the product, then making products actually can be a very good love story. Thanks.